Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most chilling, absolutely baffling historical puzzles out there, the 1959 Dyatlov Pass Incident. If you're someone who loves dissecting unsolved mysteries and trying to make sense of the seemingly impossible, well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to stick strictly to the documented facts today to map out exactly what went wrong on that fateful expedition.
Just imagine this for a second. You're out hiking through the freezing Russian mountains with your friends. You're super prepared, you know exactly what you're doing, and honestly, everything seems totally normal. But then, days later, rescuers find your tent. And it's not just empty, it's literally ripped open. Bare footprints are leading straight out into the deadly snow, and one by one, your group is found dead under just incredibly bizarre circumstances. Even now, over 60 years later, nobody knows exactly what went down. That is the core of the Dyatlov Pass mystery.
So, let's start with part 1, Journey into the Urals, the doomed expedition of 1959. Let's look at how this whole ill-fated trip actually began. It's January 1959. A group of 9 highly experienced hikers sets out on a skiing expedition into the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. The goal? Pretty straightforward: complete a challenging trek and head home. They were led by a 23-year-old student named Igor Dyatlov, and the plan was to send a message to their sports club the second they got back safely. But days pass, no message. Now at first, their families weren't panicking, right? Experienced hikers face minor delays all the time. But as the clock kept ticking, the concern really started to grow. This simple trip had slowly morphed into a desperate search and rescue mission. Teams were finally deployed into those treacherous mountains, which brings us to February 26th, the day rescuers finally spotted the group's tent.
Moving into part 2, the abandoned tent. A disturbing discovery. Because when those search teams eventually made it deep into the mountains, what they found at that campsite was, well, deeply unsettling.
When rescuers dug out the partially buried tent, one glaring, totally jarring detail stood out immediately. It was cut open from the inside. The tent wasn't shredded by wind, it wasn't crushed by the elements. It was deliberately slashed open by the hikers themselves. It literally looked like the group had just bolted into the darkness in an absolute state of sheer, unadulterated panic. Now, to put this into perspective, temperatures that night were estimated to be around -30 degrees Celsius. That's a lethal, unforgiving kind of cold. Yet somehow, even more shocking than the slashed tent were the footprints leading away from it. These tracks were made by people wearing only socks. Some were completely barefoot. Abandoning your only shelter in that kind of extreme, bitter cold without proper footwear, it's incredibly grim, and honestly, it's essentially suicidal. So, as investigators, we really have to ask ourselves, why? Why would anyone leave their shelter in those conditions? What terrifying, unimaginable event could possibly force a group of hardcore, experienced mountaineers to suddenly ditch their only source of warmth and run into the biting cold? Let's trace their final steps. This brings us to part 3, Bizarre and Tragic Discoveries. Following the footprints. The search party cautiously tracked those frantic, bare footprints straight toward the dark forest. The gruesome reality of this actually unfolded in stages. First, right near the edge of the forest, beneath a massive cedar tree, they found 2 bodies. They were wearing very little clothing, and investigators noticed evidence of a small, frantically built fire nearby. Next, they found 3 more bodies, spaced out between that tree and the tent. Based on how they were positioned, it really looked like they were desperately trying to crawl back to camp. It took months as the brutal winter dragged on, but eventually the remaining 4 hikers were discovered buried deep beneath the snow in a ravine. And it's the bizarre condition of those last 4 bodies that really blew this mystery wide open. They hadn't just frozen to death, they had suffered massive, completely inexplicable physical traumas. We're talking a fractured skull, forcefully broken ribs, and, most famously, one hiker was found entirely missing her tongue. These absolutely were not typical exposure deaths. These mysterious, high-impact injuries pushed the case from a tragic freezing accident into something way darker. Which leads us perfectly into part 4, Decades of Theories, trying to explain the unexplainable. With such a wild collection of physical evidence, the slashed tent, barefoot tracks, massive physical trauma, investigators and the public have spent decades desperately trying to piece this puzzle together.
Over the years, countless theories have popped up. On one side, you've got theories rooted in natural disasters. A lot of modern experts actually believe a specific type of rare, delayed slab avalanche forced the hikers to flee the tent in a blind panic. Others suggest that powerful mountain winds created these strange, low-frequency sounds that literally terrified the group into running. But because the natural theories always seem to leave a few loose ends, fringe explanations have really gained traction. Some folks point fingers at secret military weapons testing. Others, well, they've blamed unknown creatures or even aliens. While modern science leans heavily toward the avalanche theory, the reality is, absolutely no single theory perfectly explains every single weird detail of this case. It's exactly why this mystery still has a grip on people all over the world.
And that takes us to our final section, Part 5, an unsolved mystery, the lingering questions. Even over 60 years later, with modern investigations actually reopening the case recently, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains this massive open wound in history. Because at the end of the day, we're still left staring at the same fundamental, maddening questions about those hikers' final moments. Why was the tent violently cut open from the inside? Why did highly experienced mountaineers run out into lethal temperatures without proper clothing? And what on earth could have caused those severe, crushing injuries? As we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with one final haunting thought to chew on. 9 experienced hikers walked into those frozen mountains, and not a single one returned alive. So what really happened out there in the freezing dark? Was it just a bizarre, incredibly tragic natural disaster? Or is there still something out there we simply don't know? Weigh the evidence yourself. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.